to play.
Yes, guys, how's it going? It's another episode of the Wolfpack podcast. This is number 5. This is a transfer special. So we've got a really lovely special guest lined up in Ben Jacobs. He's going to talk about everything transfer related. We've also got some of the Wolfpack on the panel as well, who are our main sort of posters in the realms of Twitter and Instagram when it comes to all of the business and stuff that's going on at the moment, all the Wolves news that you need to hear. 89 of you already here, guys. Get involved as much as you can. That'll be awesome. Pull up your comments, get some conversations going as well. And while you're at it as well, give us a like, give us a subscribe, whatever social media you're on at the moment. Give us a follow and etc. And get involved, man. It's going to be a good show. So yeah, we're gonna get some of the panel in. Joining us, we have John. How's it going, John? You good?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, mate. Bit warm, but I'm all right.
Mate, it is boiling in here. I was just going to say, actually, if you hear a bit of background noise, if you're on Spotify, there is a bit of a fan going, because if there wasn't, I would be melting off my chair currently. It is that hot in here. So I apologise for that in advance, but I think you could probably understand why if you live in the UK at the moment. It is boiling. Joining us as well is Matt after his live debut. How you doing, Matt? You good?
Yeah, very good, thank you. The exact same as John, to be honest. I am sweating, but
Yeah,
I'm very excited about this podcast and can't wait to get involved.
Man. Nice one. Dragos is here, our mod as well. Nice one. Still no number 9, says Lewis. We'll get into all that, Lewis. Don't you worry, mate. We'll get into that, mate.
That's Louise, yeah. I'm very aware of that. Is, yeah.
Louise,
yeah,
sorry, I can't read.
Oh, nice legend one. Joining.
Ben's here as well. Right, that's our panel. We're going to get our special guest in now, and joining us is an absolute legend. I always say that, but he genuinely is a massive legend. If you know about all of the speculation that goes on during all of this transfer windowed stuff, this is the guy that really knows his stuff and everything, and we're really honoured to have him here. It's Mr. Ben Jacobs. How you doing, Mr. Ben Jacobs? How you doing?
Good evening, gents. I'm very well. Thank you for the kind introduction, even though, as we said off air, I am a Leicester fan, but we don't really care about that Leicester Wolves rivalry, do we? Too much, anyway.
We were literally just talking about that. We don't really see that as a rivalry at all, to be honest. I feel a little bit the same about Villa, though. To be honest, I don't really think there's a rivalry other than West Brom really for us. But yeah, Leicester for us, 100%. Now we don't like playing you first, which seems to happen every single season you're in the Premier League. But there you go. Nice. So hope you're all well, everyone in the comments. Get involved as much as you possibly can. Ben says evening all to all of you guys as well. Get involved. We're going to pull your comments up as we go. A load to talk about. I thought we'd start off about something that's very current going on at the moment. Of course, the Euros have kicked off. We're in a few weeks in now. And I thought I'd just get your views on England's performance so far. So, John, take it away, mate. What are you thinking so far?
Yeah, so I've watched all the games so far, and I think it's very safe football. I don't think we're attacking enough. I don't think the players that we've got on the pitch have really shown what they're capable of. I think there's a bit of a starvation up the top of the pitch with Kane. I think he's the kind of player, it's an old school number 9. Due to his age and stuff now, he just likes the ball at his feet. And I don't think he's getting that service. And I thought, especially yesterday, I just thought nothing really is going on for the left-hand side of the pitch. Everything maybe went through the right or through the middle, but there's not much going on through the left. I don't think the midfield's working that well. I can understand why he removed Trent from the group and brought in a different midfielder, but it still isn't quite working. So I think definitely changes have to be made, maybe a formation change. I would personally play 2 in midfield and play maybe Palmer as a 10. And then, yeah, hopefully that would change everything. But yeah, it's not been that great so far.
Yeah, I think a shake-up's definitely needed, and you can see why some players were left out, of course. But to be honest, it didn't really make any difference, did it? Leaving out one player that didn't seem to do very well didn't make any difference to the performance we saw yesterday. So, yeah, same question, Matt. What are you thinking about England so far?
Yeah, I think it's been a poor start, to be honest. I think it's very much the case that, for me, Southgate is shoehorning our best players into one team. I think it's very much the case that, as John mentioned, Foden on that left-hand side, it just isn't working. Everyone knows his best position's in the 10, but then you've got Bellingham, so it's sort of the case of sacrificing one or the other. And it's just not worked out. I think the Trent in midfield sort of experiment, as John mentioned as well, didn't work out. And I think, if anything, that our best players have been, as well, Mark Gahan, and he was the one that really a lot of people were sort of questioning and thinking, is he going to be up to the
100%.
task? But for me, he's been, him and Pickford probably have been our two top players. So it's been a tough start. I think it's been frustrating to see when we have scored, which is quite rare. But when we have scored, for example, Kane's goal, we've just sat back straight away. And you'd like to think that with the players we have and the personnel we have, you'd like to think that it should be the case that when we do score, we should be pushing for a second and third goal. But with Southgate, it seems to be complete opposite. And when we score, we almost sit into a really low block and then struggle to sort of get anything going from the rest of the game. So it's been tough because, let's be honest, we should be, we won the group, of course, top the group, but the performances were really poor, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think we're all going to agree with you, mate, to be honest. I think the thing that I've really disliked is when we've gone ahead and we should really be killing a game off, we've just sat back and invited loads of pressure. And against teams like, it don't matter who you play, if you invite enough pressure and you give a team enough opportunities, eventually you're going to get punished. We've seen that happen to Wolves a bunch of times this season as well, where
it's like Dan said in the chat.
Yeah, we've got ourselves ahead. Yeah, what did he say?
He said, "Looks like we cannot break teams down," and he's completely right. We can't.
Yeah. Oh yeah, cool. And also, we might start seeing better performances now. Opposition teams are going to start coming at us. Yeah, to be fair, you are right. We haven't played anyone so far that's really sort of demanded possession. So yeah, might see a different England for sure. But yeah, Ben, what about you, mate? What do you make of England so far?
I agree with a lot of what you guys have said. If we force in a Wolves connection, if there was a sort of English version of Rayan Ait-Nouri on that left-hand side, big difference compared to Kieran Trippier. And that's an underrated point, in my opinion, because he switches sides. And that means that it's harder for him to go wide and on the overlap. And that's the best chance of Phil Foden cutting inside, because if he stays deeper and doesn't overlap, then Bellingham is your central free player and Foden's out wide. Too much has been made of, well, why is Foden out wide? He's out wide for Man City, but he has the freedom to roam, whereas for England, he doesn't. So someone else on that left-hand side needs to support him and create the space to allow him to get into more threatening areas. And then on the other side, I do think there's an argument of Saka out and Palmer in. But I agree with what a few of you said about how more serious opposition who play a more expansive game may allow England to punish them on the counter attack, and they might be better against stronger opposition. I think the last point I'd make is I don't buy into this. There's an easy side of the draw and there's a hard side of the draw, because one, if you get to the final, you're playing the best team from, yes, on paper, the more difficult side of the draw, but two, and I don't know the exact maths and permutations in light of the games that have just happened, but statistically the likelihood is that it's Netherlands, and if you beat Netherlands, the likelihood is it's Italy. Those are two really difficult games. So yeah, on paper it's an easier, in inverted commas, side of the draw, but I don't like the idea of England against the Netherlands in the round of 16. That's exactly the kind of game we could lose and then cue meltdown because they will have massively underperformed.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there's no easy sort of way forward, is there? We've seen that loads of times. I mean, you could say that England have been pretty lucky as of late, really, when it comes to having easier teams to play. But to be fair, like, you've still got to play that whoever you're playing, and if a team wants it more than you, then they'll fight for it. And there's always going to be one or two players, even it doesn't matter what team you're playing, there's always going to be a couple of players that really want to, put you to the sword. And sometimes I just don't think don't think England have showed enough for me, so far at least, that we could inspire confidence from us as fans. Really, I don't feel like it's the same as it's been recently. I mean, but like England of old, you know, you get all the family together, or you go out with your mates and everything, you really buzzing to see them, and I don't really feel like there's excitement around that team at the moment because of the performances we're seeing.
Yeah, I can't really disagree. I think it's very much the case that these performances are very draining, and I think a lot of it is due to, you know, not getting the best out of the personnel we have, and when it comes to Harry Kane as well, you're playing with two players that, yes, Saka's a winger, but they're sort of playing narrow and playing side. And when Kane drops deep to get the ball, there's no runners in behind. And, you know, you look at when he thrived at Tottenham, you know, when he's done well at Bayern, he's had, for example, players like Son, Sané, etc., to make runs in behind and for him to sort of use his passing range. And I think people have had a go at Kane. He's got a lot of stick, and I agree at times he hasn't been good enough. But everyone knows his game is dropping deep and supplying. And when he's dropped deep, he's had no one to really pass to because the players that are on the wing have come narrow and come short. So it's just really
do you guys think it's more personnel, or do you think it's more managerial in terms of problems?
Manager. Definitely manager.
Yeah.
What do you think, Ben?
I think there is an argument for both.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Southgate's the one that's going to get it in the neck. And if England go out in the round of 16, almost certainly he won't see out the contract, and that will be his last chance to win a major tournament. Where I think it's on the players is to lead in that moment. And the thing about Harry Kane is he's not always involved in terms of touches, but we know he's a clinical finisher. And he's got the armband, and you need to see as a senior player that kind of leadership to add a bit of intensity. So rather than him just being stranded and not getting service, he needs to bark a bit more. You want that kind of Pickford-like over-exuberance at times to set the tone. And Harry Kane does his talking with his feet. And if he's not involved in the game, somebody somewhere on that field has to show a bit more leadership, whether it's the centre of the park or whether it's Kane himself, because it's harder, in my opinion, for Foden to do it because he's not as comfortable in that dynamic. It's harder for Saka because he's quite a shy character. It's not something that Gahey can do because he's newer to the setup. There's no Harry Maguire, and people might deride him a little bit, but we know that on his day, he's a great leader and he's had a good season for Manchester United. So he's missed there. It's harder for Trippier because, again, he's having to focus on playing on the other side where he's done it before, but he's not as comfortable. So what you want to see from Kane and the players that are more senior and are more on form and are more comfortable where they are, which is basically Kane and Bellingham and only one or two others at the moment. They've really got to drive it, and they've got to not just do their talking on the field with their feet, but they've got to have this chemistry. And they've had enough time. They're there all the time, 24/7, creating a team mentality. Every little thing off the football field has been taken care of. I mean, they've even shipped over a scent. So when they're in a certain area, it feels like energy. And when they're in their bedrooms, it feels like slumber. So all these little marginal gains are there for them. And then on the field, at times, you just don't feel like the players are talking and doing the basics right. And that needs to change. Otherwise, they're going to go out very early in this tournament.
Yeah. Cool. So there's a lot of people saying that Neto's starting tonight as well, which is good to see. Hopefully that, you know, inspires some good performances so we can see some more money rolling in for him if he is going to go. We're going to talk about all the Wolves business now as well. But I thought just before we go into that, let's talk about, Ben, how did you get into football and your current role that you've got now?
Yeah, so at the moment, I'm a senior football correspondent with Give Me Sport and a Premier League commentator with TalkSport. And I also carry the slightly interesting title Saudi football correspondent as well, which is a nod to my time in the Middle East. And I cover that market. And there might be some talking points for Wolves when we get into the transfers regarding some Saudi moves. And prior to that, I was at CBS, beIN Sports, BBC Sport. So I've been in football journalism for 10 years now, predominantly as a broadcaster. But as you'll know, doing a podcast like this, you have to be multi-platform. And I think it's really important as a journalist to be accountable and to engage with fans. And I try and do that on social media as well. So I started making tea at BBC Leicester. I went to university at Oxford, studied English, and I was working for BBC Oxford And in a weird way, that benefited my career because Oxford and Reading were the same patch. And I don't know why, but nobody really cared about Reading, and Oxford were the bigger club. So I followed Reading, and then Reading ended up getting promoted to the Premier League. I worked at BBC Northampton and got an opportunity to commentate on Rushden and Diamonds, the second team. And then from there, like in any career, the opportunities just come. I went over to the Middle East, enjoyed my time there. Really good for making connections, not just in football, because when people come over there, it's a smaller market and they're very relaxed. So you get a lot of FaceTime with people. So I found myself, believe it or not, playing five-a-side football with the great late Diego Maradona, or doing a sit-down interview for the sports magazine that I was editor of with Lionel Messi. Because the region will be like targeted, and a sponsor or a club will come out there and they want to get exposure. And there's not all these amazing greats lining up in their thousands. There's probably only 20 sports journalists out there. So you get the opportunity to advance your career. And then I went to America, worked for CBS, and now technically I'm freelance, but I carry the titles that I mentioned before. So it's been an exciting career to date. I don't take these opportunities for granted. I get to cover the Euros. I'll be covering the Olympic football tournament, and somehow in between a little bit of the transfer window as well.
So you're a very busy guy.
Yeah, don't get much sleep. Although once the season starts, I might take off the first few weeks and finally get a holiday.
Yeah. You said you're a Leicester fan and everything. Did you get to many of the games last season while they've been in the Championship?
Yeah, due to work, because I was doing Premier League commentary, I missed a lot of the Leicester games, although I caught one or two of them when they were in London and maybe playing on a weeknight or a Sunday. But we've been season ticket holders as a family at Leicester since, I think, long before I was born, in the 60s and 70s, when it was still standing. And my parents used to watch Gary Lineker and that generation. I'm more of the Martin O'Neill growing up when Leicester won 2 League Cups and yo-yoed between the Premier League and the Championship. And I suppose that was the same kind of era as Wolves and Steve Bull, if we're to bring it back to Wolves, because I'm sure nobody really wants to hear about Leicester. But I was lucky at beIN Sports to cover us winning the Premier League, and I made a documentary on that, and that was phenomenal, to be a journalist, to be pitch side, to be at many of the games, and then in retrospect to talk to some of the protagonists like Riyad Mahrez, Jamie Vardy, and put together what was just an incredible fairy tale that I'm sure every football fan could get behind. So that's nice when you get a bit of an intersect. I think generally, in a weird way, when you're covering your own club as a journalist, you're harsher, and you don't want anyone to feel like you're biased. You don't want anyone to feel like you're letting the fan in you talk first. So you have stricter standards to really make sure, if you're going to report something on your club, you're not only positive about it, but you've got a bit more extra layers of scrutiny, so no one can ever just say that you're only talking because you're a fan. So if anything, I cover a bit less of Leicester because of that, but I always enjoy it when I get to go to games.
Yeah, we've talked to a bunch of fans of obviously Wolves and everything, and a lot of those guys also say that, you know, that they try not to focus too much on those areas because they feel like there's always bias and stuff coming from your opinions and what have you. So I do get that. But yeah, man, that's kind of fascinating. You started from the bottom, you know, making tea, and then look where you are now. That's really inspiring. So fair play. I mean, must have been a lot of hard work behind the scenes to get you to that point. So fair play. There's obviously going to be a load of questions from myself, from John and Matt as well. So we'll leave it there for now for that. Go on to some Wolves business, probably why a lot of you guys are here. Also, apparently, Georgia's beating Portugal.
Yeah, I've just seen that. Kvaratskhelia, who is linked with a move away, although Napoli say he's not for sale, with a decent little finish. I've got it on behind the podcast.
Yeah, fair play, man. No.
Good little finish in the bottom right-hand corner.
Love that. Ben Jones is one of our Wolfpack members as well. He's keeping us up to date, bless him. Lovely. So let's move on to some Wolves business. So we've already made a bit of business, which is pretty mental actually, considering you look at the transfer windows just gone and that, and there's barely any business. And I follow a lot of different Wolves YouTubers and stuff, and there's always this famous thing where they do like a live thing on deadline, like a live video on deadline, and nothing happens, and it's literally mundane, boring experience ever. And we literally already have done business. So obviously, Tommy Doyle was made permanent, which was obviously a deal we all saw coming. And we've talked about him extensively anyway. But I'd like to hear your opinion of Tommy Doyle, Ben.
Yeah, smart business. He was obviously very involved. I think he played 30 games last season, and it was inevitable that Wolves would take up the option, which is at good market value. I think only just over 4 million paid. So the type of deal that didn't really require much negotiation. I think the other thing I heard was just the player was sold pretty much from day one, or certainly 10 games in. He felt like Wolves was the destination he wanted rather than to go back to the parent club. And that's always a very productive starting point when it's a loan with an option. But from Doyle's perspective, he felt like he settled. And what I think we saw on the field, and you guys will know better than me, so feel free to chime in and correct me, but my own opinion from a commentary point of view is he's got confidence on the ball and also a very diverse and impressive range of passing. And for a young player, he's still, only 22. That means there's a high ceiling, and hopefully he can only get better from there. And we also saw a tenacity to his game when he'd helped Sheffield United get back into the Premier League during a previous loan spell. So he's got better from that loan spell into the Wolves tenure. And I think he's shown that he's capable of being a very solid, intelligent, positionally savvy player that can have big benefit to Wolves. So at just over 4 million, it's a no-brainer. Player wanted the move. Wolves happy to pay the money. Manchester City happy to sell. And therefore, it's just a deal that suits all parties. And of course, that will become official on July the 1st.
It's interesting, obviously, the business going forward for that was very much tied into the Matheus Nunes deal as well, obviously. And it's interesting also to see, obviously, Matheus Nunes not really getting into Pep's side, very much being on the bench. And even when he's been introduced, he's not really pulled up too many trees and everything. And is it true that he might be sort of linked to a move, or maybe like it wouldn't be such a shock if he was, sort of thing?
Yeah, not necessarily a shock. 25 years of age, and Manchester City would have to recoup, therefore. And I think from Pep's point of view, he's still a long-term admirer, which means that I would lean more towards him staying. Barring an astronomical offer, a 5-year contract, I think it was over 50 million from the top of my head. So when you look at it in those terms, it is going to take time. And it can be difficult to really settle at Manchester City. We saw it with Jack Grealish. I don't think that he hit the ground running. A lot of Manchester City fans felt that he was replaceable. Even now, there's talk he might exit, but Pep Guardiola stayed loyal, and Nunez falls into that category. But it is interesting. They spent big money on Nunez, and the same can be said for Calvin Phillips as well. And neither of those signings have quite worked out. But because of the length of the contract and the belief from the manager, I still sense, barring anything really surprising or astronomical financially that gets Manchester City more than their money back, that he'll stay at least another season. And then we've got a really interesting situation at Man City, because Pep Guardiola has said publicly that he's more likely at the moment to leave at the end of this season rather than renew. And if he does so, then certain players may decide that it's the right time to depart as well. And that's when maybe in a year's time, if it's still not working for Nunez, he could come back on the market.
Nice. And then obviously it seems like I'm talking loads, but you have got a load of questions, John and Matt, coming up as well. But I thought I'd go over these things first. Rodrigo Gomez was obviously our next signing. Bit of a shock, really, this one. I know we were linked with him for a while, and I know that it's been a very, very drawn out sort of a thing, really. I think he's been on the radar for a very long time. Basically, we've only really seen video footage of him and everything. Do you know anything about Rodrigo Gomez, Ben, to sort of talk to the other guys?
So it's a 5-year deal. He's only 20, and the fee is around 50 million euros. So that's pushing 13 million quid. Big investment for a young talent, but a deal that's seen as value from Wolves' perspective. And he's impressed me from what I've seen playing for Portugal under-21s, and also on a loan spell at Estoril, where he scored, I think it was 7 goals in 30 appearances. And Wolves did really well here because there was heavy competition, Atletico Madrid, and I'm told a late hijack move from Roma as well. But the player wanted Wolves and the opportunity to play in the Premier League. And the qualities that are going to be quite useful to Wolves is one, versatility, because he's a winger, but he can also play fullback. The second thing, he's just really, really fast, lightning pace. And it's not just speed of feet, but speed of thought as well. Loves to dribble. I suppose you'd expect that from a winger, but he's like a traditional winger who will hug the touchline, who will get white chalk on the boots. And when he cuts inside, at least at the level of Estoril, we wait and see if that translates to Premier League football. He was pretty clinical as well. So the patience, I think, will come in that sense, because when you get a dribbler who's a technician and is fast, when it works, it's brilliant. But the patience may come in the fact that he may overrun things. He may put his head down and not look up at times. The final ball may not always be there. And that will come over time because he's only 20 years of age. So I wouldn't call him a finished product, but I like the attributes that he brings. And I think the fact that he can play winger or fullback will just give Wolves a bit of needed versatility at times, especially if they pick up injuries or within game management, they want to bring him on in a slightly deeper position. And he's very solid defensively as well. A lot of what people will see in videos are about the goals or about the dribbling skills or about the speed. But actually, when I've seen him play for Portugal under 21s and he's been asked to take on a slightly more rigid role defensively from the, albeit small sample set that I've seen in person, I think he looks very intelligent defensively. So there's that rush of blood to the head and the wildness when he's on the ball. But in a deeper position when he has to defend, he looks a lot more calm and intelligent. And that would suggest that he could have a very high ceiling. So this to me looks like a smart bit of business for Wolves.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I'm intrigued about that last thing you said about the fact that, you know, he might be a bit defensively sound as well. Because I think when you think of a player that's, well, I mean, when he's come in, he's really just been addressed as a winger through Wolves media. So it, you know, could be quite an interesting signing, as you say. And then obviously after that, we've also been linked really heavily, and I'm pretty sure this deal's done as much as he just needs a medical, I think, if that's right, with Pedro Lima. Yeah,
this one's done, and he's been dubbed as the next Cafu, so no pressure. And Wolves were able to hijack a move from Blueco 22, which is Chelsea's parent company. They were thinking of Strasbourg in mind, but with an eventual pathway to Chelsea. So, you know, if you're a Wolves fan, you can say we beat Chelsea. But if we're being really geeky and technical, then it was the parent company. Strasbourg would have been the first destination, and then ultimately through to Chelsea if things went according to plan. And as you say, there's a few formalities here, but it's essentially a done deal. And interestingly, Wolves sources are adamant that this is a straight into the first team kind of signing. That's how highly they rate him. So we're not talking necessarily about a few minutes here and there. We're not talking about being loaned out after he settles. We're talking about a player for the now. And nice. I would expect that Lima's bought into that, because otherwise he would have gone to Strasbourg and played every single week. So he must think, there's no guarantees, of course, because it's on sporting merit, but he must think that there's that pathway there to be starting multiple games, 10 plus games, or at least featuring in 25 or 30 games in all competitions across the season. And I think if he was told that it just might be cameos of a few minutes here, a few minutes there, or only in the lower rounds of the FA Cup and the League Cup, I think he would have gone to Strasbourg, because this was not a Wolves planned deal where Blueco came in. This was a near Blueco done deal where Wolves were the hijackers. So they're delighted with this, and I would expect us to hear more and more as the season goes on about Lima. And if he lives up to that Cafu comparison, then Wolves will have an outstanding bit of business.
I mean, we're all buzzing about that sort of comparison for sure. Nice one. That's our business so far. I've obviously been linked to a bunch of players, but I thought I would go straight to your questions now, John. So go ahead, John, with some questions, bud.
Okay, well, I've had many questions about Max Kilman, so I'm just going to put all those questions into one for you, Ben. And that is, like, what is the latest with Max? Obviously, we've heard West Ham, we've heard Newcastle have made offers, some included players. Are we likely to see any more offers come in? Are you aware of who the players were? We're aware of the Newcastle one. We're not aware of the West Ham one. And also, could you see another club coming in? Because we've heard rumours that Napoli may still hold an interest. We've heard that Manchester United hold an interest.
Yeah, all good questions. I think Wolves' position is still that they want to have Kilman. So it's not like he's transfer listed. It's not like they're selling because they need the money. But there's a appreciation if the right offer comes at about 45 million, that Wolves would probably accept that. And anything around the 25 to 35 million mark is going to be very difficult for suitors. So this is about meeting the valuation. And you can understand why, because you got Jared Branthwaite in the market, valued at the moment at 70 million plus. A lot of teams are looking for that left-sided centre-back. Kilman's a ball-playing defender. He's got a lot of experience, and he's been very consistent for Wolves. Maybe, only my opinion, 2 seasons ago rather than last season, he was better. Yeah. But ultimately, never terrible. And this is what you want. Someone that's a leader. And we all know that Kilman's path was very atypical. He came through futsal. And as a result, that kind of playing in panic and that technique that he developed is a bit different to other people in his position. And he's always said that that upbringing into 11-a-side football helped him in many ways. So I still think he can develop, whether it's at Wolves or whether it's at another club. To speak specifics, let's start, I suppose, with West Ham, who we can term favourites. And I use favourites in the context of the suitors comparatively, rather than saying they're favourites compared to him staying at Wolves, because we should be respectful to Wolves, and they're still in control. They can still reject. I don't think that Kilman's going to throw his toys out the pram. But the reality is there is appeal there for playing in London and under Julian Lopetegui, and likely with a wage increase as well. So if the valuation's hit by West Ham, then they can be very confident. Now, my information is a little bit different to others, and I start by saying I'm not here to shout down other journalists or to disrespect or dismiss anyone else's reporting. It's something we all hate doing. But my understanding is there's been one singular West Ham United bid, and Wolves are not yet in receipt of anything else from West Ham United. And that was around the 25 million mark and was rejected. There is some talk from very credible people that a second bid has been placed and that second bid includes a player. My understanding remains, as of now, that there's no second bid yet from West Ham. But the expectation is that one will come. With Newcastle, there was an approach that did include a player, Elliot Anderson, and the total package was higher than the West Ham bid, somewhere in the region, it depends, I suppose, how you value Anderson, but somewhere in the region of 35 million. And like a lot of these other things that we've seen with Villa and Everton and Chelsea and Villa, probably mirror deals. In other words, spoken about collectively, but collective. I'm sorry, slight disconnection there. So we're back.
That's all right. That's all right.
Yeah, so, I don't know what you missed there. I'll change it back to better mic, and then we'll continue. So, yeah, within the Newcastle bid, just to reiterate in case it cut off, and my apologies to everyone, the Newcastle offer was around 35 million value, but likely would have been put through as 2 separate deals. And Elliot Anderson was factored into that deal, but the player's not interested in leaving Newcastle. So that was a bit of a non-starter. And again, West Ham feel that they are going to be able to top that, and Wolves were not interested in that Newcastle bid either. And I think if Wolves are to do business, they want straight cash. They want 40, 45 million. They're not necessarily interested in a player being chucked in. There's nobody that is on the West Ham books or on the Newcastle books that they desperately want at this point. They've done a bit of business already. So it's about, if you put down the cash, then a certain number Wolves would accept. If you don't put down the straight cash, you don't stand a very good chance. And we wait and see whether that changes. But nobody's met anywhere close to Wolves' valuation yet. Napoli's offer, which is a bit older, was 30 million. And again, it was rejected pretty quickly. So we're seeing a pattern here that it's got to be well above 30 million. It's got to be pretty close to 45 million. In an ideal world, from Wolves' perspective, it's got to be straight cash. unless they're suddenly presented with a name that they desperately want. Otherwise, they're just going to sit and wait. But I think where the worry is for Wolves is that there's players that may come out of the woodwork after the financial deadline who are waiting to balance the books, who are waiting to bring in money, who may realise Kilman is available on the market and may come after the 1st of July when they can put it onto the 2024-2025 accounts. And that may still be West Ham, who place a bigger offer after the financial deadline passes, because they've done a lot of business already, West Ham United. They've spent a fair amount of money. Luis Guilherme is an excellent signing, but that overall package was relatively high. And Manchester United could be one to watch as well. They've inquired about Kilman before. They are looking for a centre-back. And if they don't get Jared Branthwaite, could potentially enter the race as well. We wait and see. There's been no club-to-club contact yet. But I think Wolves' fear is just that there's enough interest bubbling and it's a long enough window that someone might eventually hit the valuation. And this will not be a straight rejection. If a number in and around that 45 million is hit, then it would likely be too good for Wolves to turn down. And then I would expect Kilman to depart.
Great.
Cool.
Cheers, Ben. Some really good information. So I was just making a few notes in case I forgot about some of the stuff that was said. But yeah, very interesting about after the 1st of July due to accounts. I haven't actually thought about that personally myself. So glad you mentioned that. Teams will definitely be in a better position after the 1st of July. Okay, so next question is around. I know you said previously you were already going to talk about it, but I actually wrote this. So I had this question written down yesterday that came from a fan. What kind of situation are the Saudis in this summer? Are they going to be spending quite as much as they did last summer? And have they targeted any Wolves players?
So with Saudi Arabia, the volume of signings will be lower. It was 94 foreigners in the summer of 23. Summer of 24 will be more like 25 to 30, of which they're hoping for 6 or 10 big names. And when we say like elite names, we're talking about older players who have won countless trophies or current peak players in that Salah, De Bruyne mode. So it's no disrespect to anyone else I mentioned, but your central deals in Saudi are millions and millions and millions for really elite tier ones. So Nacho's just gone to Al Qadsiya and is heavily decorated. Kevin De Bruyne is a target. We wait and see whether they move now or 2025. And then beneath that, you've got a bunch of other really great players, many of them at their peak. And I would say based on last summer, you're talking about Mitrovic's even, who are proven Premier League. But I don't think you can quite compare Mitrovic to De Bruyne. So that's not me saying Mitrovic is tier 2. I don't want to put it in those terms. But those deals don't have to be as central, which means the clubs, if they like them and have got budget, aren't always waiting on Ministry of Sport funds so they can be a little bit more free. Or some of the smaller clubs can come into the conversation. And the reason why the volume is lower is because you have quotas in Saudi Arabia, and each team now, it's changed for this season, can sign 10 in total foreigners. 2 have to be 21 years of age or younger, and 8 can be any age foreigners. But they went so big 12 months ago that some of the players they like are still there. So 2023 was almost filling foreign quotas from pretty much scratch, whereas 2024... a lot of these teams have got 3, 4, 5 foreigners or more that they want to retain. And that's why they'll do less business. So the ambition is still there, but there's not the need for as many. Then Wolves' interest, I think there's a historical desire to bring Jose Sarr over. And there has been an approach from Saudi deal makers maybe 6 months ago. So we wait and see if anything develops there. We had Wojciech Szczesny, who was set to join Al Nassr, but that's hit some complications. So they may still be in the market for a goalkeeper. Al Ittihad are looking for a goalkeeper as well. I would say at the moment it's quite quiet on the Sarr front. And if there is to be a Premier League goalkeeper that moves, it's more likely to be Ederson from Manchester City. There's some interest in Alisson Becker as well, but I think Liverpool will try and persuade him to stay. So right now, if I had to rank goalkeepers, I would say Ederson, pretty likely. Szczesny, complications. Let's see whether anything changes. And then the sort of Juventus situation is difficult there because they've kind of already replaced him. And then we wait and see if anything moves regarding Sarr or Becker. But it's less likely that the Saudis will come in for them. Other Wolves players, the interest, I'm told, in Pablo Sarabia is still there. And I think 12 months ago, it was almost a given because he was like frozen out, wasn't he? You guys all know better than me, but he wasn't really involved. He wasn't really playing. It looked like he was quite unhappy. And then I seem to recall that he got more minutes and he kind of ended up being more integral and being very useful to Wolves. So maybe the Wolves position has changed, but Al Ittifaq and Al Shabab both still have an interest in Sarabia. It's just a case of now, 12 months on, whether they can get him. But when Damari Gray ended up going to Ittifaq, which is Steven Gerrard's club, had he not ended up moving, and there were real issues with Everton and friction, next on the list for Ittifaq was Sarabia. And they were very confident at that point that they could agree terms and get him and that Wolves would sell. Now, 12 months on, it's a slightly different position. So let's wait and see whether the Saudis can come back. But there's several Saudi clubs camped out in London this week and next before they move on to places like France and Spain. There's more than one club and more than one senior central deal maker in London at a base taking meetings with various clubs. And from the 1st of July, the Saudis can start signing. So let's wait and see whether anything moves. But there's definitely going to be some interest in a few Wolves players. It's just a case of whether the players that historically were of possibilities for Saudi clubs still want to make the moves. Because I think Sarr will have a lot of other options now if he departs. And it may well be that Sarabia is no longer right up there at the top of Wolves' list of potential outgoings.
Nice. Brilliant. Cheers, Ben. Really good answers there. So another question I've got from a fan was, obviously we had loads of interest in Pedro Neto from clubs, and then unfortunately had another injury, and then after that it died down a bit. Do you still see, if he has a successful Euros, which fingers crossed, touch wood, I'm not watching the game, but he's doing well as we speak, do you think clubs will still approach him? Do you think the injury has scared clubs? And what kind of figure do you think that Wolves could ask for?
Yeah, I think the good news for Wolves fans is this one is quiet at the moment. And even though a lot of clubs want a player like Neto in his position, they've been looking elsewhere. So I'm not aware yet of any bids from the suitors that are so often linked with him. The injury record is definitely a part of that. Liverpool, I'm told, are out of the race entirely, and we're never really in it, despite the fact that every so often people would mention them in the same conversation as Neto. Arsenal are maybe the ones that have historically held the most serious interest in terms of Wolves' Premier League rivals, but it's price. And I come back to what I said before. I don't want to appear like a broken record, but anyone wanting the outlay for Neto is going to have to wait in likelihood until later in the window and assess their own outgoing situation and then decide if they can move. So a new suitor that I'm told is considering Neto is PSG, and they have a bit more budget because Mbappe's left. And Mbappe, even though it's not finalised yet, and there's been various stories out there about friction and unpaid wages and so on that I won't get into, but basically Mbappe has a verbal agreement with Nasser Al-Khelaifi that says he's leaving the club on a free transfer, but he won't leave the club high and dry. And he's foregone a bunch of loyalty bonuses and promised other things to the club. And then when they take his wage bill off, they've got money to spend. So PSG, unlike some of their European rivals, particularly in England, have that kind of money. Dortmund, for example, who look like they're going to miss out on Jadon Sancho, really like Neto as well, but they don't have anywhere near the money required, which might sound weird because you've got the Bellingham fee, they've qualified for the Champions League, they've not signed Ian Maatsen, who's gone to Aston Villa, but their model is not to take money and then just spend. They've got a really tight budget, and they're not looking to spend that kind of money on one player. So it wouldn't surprise me if the season starts. I know the window will still be open and Neto's still at Wolves. Maybe there'll be a surprise bid after the 1st of July when people start putting the money on 2024, 2025. But the thing putting off suitors is two things. One, Wolves' valuation, which is 60 million or more potentially, but a minimum of 60 million to engage. And two is the injury record. And when you combine the fact that it's a big outlay with a slightly dicey injury record of late, that is putting off suitors, Liverpool in particular. I can't speak to Arsenal's interest at the moment, but I think Arsenal have got other priorities first. They'll spend on a striker. We know they were in the conversation for Benjamin Sesko, but he stayed at Leipzig. I think also Arsenal will look to strengthen in defence, and they want a central midfielder, and they feel like someone has to come in and complement Rice, and maybe Martin Zubimendi, to my knowledge, is top of their list. And if they can persuade him, that's a 50 million euros outlay. And again, how are you then going to find another 60 million for Neto? So Wolves are in a position where they don't need financially for PSR to sell Neto. And that might mean that it just runs on with a lot of speculation. And come the first game of the season, he's still a Wolverhampton Wanderers player. And let's hope he's a fit one.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Cheers again, Ben. Really good answers there. So, another question I've got is Wolves are obviously in the market for a striker. I don't know if you're aware, but in January, they tried to move for Yuri Alberto from South America, which didn't go through due to what we've heard, agent fees. And then, which I know you did tweet a lot about, obviously, Broja, and they weren't prepared to pay the money. So we're hearing that they are still looking for a striker. Are you aware of anyone that they've been looking at who they have interest in?
Yeah, I think that Wolves want a striker. We've known this since January. Amanda Broja could still be one to watch, but the price will have to drop. So he didn't, unfortunately, shine for Albania, and Chelsea were maybe hoping that his value would rise, although I thought he did well in the opening game. But the problem with Broja is he's got all the attributes, he's got all of the high ceiling, but 38 games for Chelsea, 3 goals, and 8 appearances on loan for Fulham and 0 goals. So you actually have to go back to his loan spell at Southampton before you see him as being relatively promising and prolific at the top level. So someone's either got to get the best out of him, and that might come through consistent game time. I'm sure if you look at the 38 games for Chelsea, many of them have been cameos with a small amount of minutes. So it is really easy to use the numbers to be detrimental against him. But what you're basically saying is 35 million for 38 Chelsea appearances for 3 goals. It's a lot of money. And Wolves' perspective is that they would either want a loan with an option, and then if he proves himself, they'll activate that option, and that option will be higher in order to get Chelsea their value, but Wolves would not be committed, or they would be looking at more around the 20 million mark, which is 15 million below Chelsea's valuation. So it's going to be difficult for Chelsea to hit that number. But one thing's for sure, Wolves won't progress on Broja unless either the structure of the deal, loan with option, or alternatively loan with obligation, where obligation is tied towards goals. So it might become an option into an obligation if he scores 15 plus goals. But then you say, okay, he's proven himself, so we're quite happy to pay that. Or alternatively, if it's a straight deal around the 20 million mark, then Wolves might be tempted. They're up against competition still from Everton, and dialogue remains between Everton and Chelsea on Broja. And now he's returned from the Euros, the expectation is that it might resolve itself relatively quickly one way or the other. I think if Xerxes goes to Manchester United and Milan miss out, they'll be a very serious contender as well. So keep an eye on that one. I was always told as well that Wolves might take a look at Eddie Nketiah, who I think Arsenal would expect 35 million for as well. Crystal Palace were always seen as the most likely suitor, but as I'm sure most people listening have seen, we've had a resurgent Palace team that look really dangerous. And even though they're losing Elise, they've got Mateta, who did excellent, not just in terms of his goals, but his involvement in games, the way he held up the ball when they were winning games or when they were defending late on. He just put his body about. And I think he's exactly the kind of striker ultimately that Wolves would like. But it's going to be a case of him not being sold, in my opinion. Once you get that Elise money, and with interest in Eberechi Eze from Tottenham, who has a release clause, it means that Palace will wait and either have to take that money because the clause is triggered and the player wants to go, or they'll say, thanks very much, we've got our Elise money, we don't need to sell any of our other stars. So that kind of profile will be very difficult for Wolves to get, especially from a rival. But yeah, keep an eye on Broja. It's one possibility for Wolves, but the price will have to drop first, otherwise they'll turn their attention elsewhere.
Nice.
Brilliant. So when we spoke about earlier about Saar potentially going to Saudi, and 6 months ago they had an approach from a Saudi club, are you aware of any goalkeepers that maybe Wolves had targeted if Saar did leave the club?
Yeah, I think James Trafford was always one that they liked, but it wasn't clear at that point. This is 6 months ago what the situation would be. Now Burnley have gone down. Newcastle have made the move early on that one, and they're trying to agree a deal worth about 20 million. The offer Newcastle made was 16 million, and nothing is done yet. Newcastle are still relatively optimistic, but the problem with the Newcastle offer was that it's not just 16 million, it's add-on heavy. And that might allow the opportunity for a hijack, but we'll wait and see there. I still think that one is in Newcastle's control. And beyond that, I don't think that Wolves feel much urgency necessarily, because until it gets to the point where they know for sure there's a concrete offer on the table for Saar, they can be very happy with their goalkeeping options. So you have to plan ahead. And like I said before, for the third time in this podcast, July the 1st, different proposition. Clubs from England, anyway, may suddenly move. So if anyone in England is interested in Saar, it might not be apparent now, but it might be after July the 1st. So we'll wait and see how that progresses. I think we're going to get a bit of goalkeeper movement as well. So Georgi Mamashvili might be a target for Atletico Madrid at around 35 million. And that may be because Jan Oblak ends up leaving, not guaranteed, but you have a domino effect. If you have that domino effect, then Valencia are looking for a goalkeeper and they're relatively interested in Jose Saar. So that might be one to watch. So this, I think, is going to be less about clarity now on Saar and more about that domino effect of let's wait and see if an offer comes for him, and let's wait and see what's waiting. Apologies, we disconnected again. I've got one of these like dodgy mics here that on its day sounds good, but all it takes is a little bit of wind or a fly and then disconnects and I mute, which some would say is a good thing. But anyway, yeah, on the goalkeeper front, domino effect. So I think that now we get into the European market opening, which is one key point, and now we get over the English accounting deadline, you just get a lot more clubs moving. And in the same way, we're going to get Xerxes going, David going, Osimhen going, maybe Gyökeres moving, potentially Tony, and several other strikers on the move. You have that domino effect where teams are losing key assets and getting in a bunch of money. And then they suddenly say, well, we're going to spend some of that money. And we don't quite know where everything is going to fall yet. So I think as transfer journalists, people always want us to just say in black and white an answer. And the more responsible thing to do when you report is just accept that there's phases of the market that are unreliable. And you have to hold your hands up and say, I'm going to wait on this one and I'm going to wait and see where the movement goes, because there will be surprise suitors and there'll be a series of goalkeepers on the move, maybe including Saar. And at that point, we'll work out who's available, who's got money. And if Wolves need a goalkeeper, a target might present itself that isn't available now, that might be in a few weeks' time. So we'll see how things go on that one, but I can't really bring you too much, I have to say, at this point on Saar, because it's all pretty quiet, and I think that will remain the case until the Euros are over.
Okay, brilliant. Cheers, man. So last question from me, and I've had a lot of fans message me similar kind of questions. It's mainly about the fringe players that have been out on loan. So very similar to what you said, I assume a domino effect with a lot of them moving on. But we've obviously got Gonzalo Guedes that was at loan at Villarreal. And we're hearing different rumours about club interested in him. Fabio Silva, who was loaned at Rangers. We've heard that his agent has publicly said that they are interested in him going to the Spanish and the Italian market. And we've also got, who's the other one that they asked?
Pedence.
Daniel Pedence, who obviously had a really good season at Olympiacos. I'm just wondering, have you heard anything about that? Maybe if we start with Daniel Pedence with Olympiacos, because there was rumours that there is and there isn't an option to buy, and it's been very unclear. Do you think they'll get it done? Is there anyone else interested? Or?
Yeah, I don't know whether he'll end up staying at Olympiacos or not. There's connections in ownership with Nottingham Forest to maybe on the lookout for that kind of profile. But I think the feeling is that the price is quite high at this stage. It might cost somewhere in excess of 15 million, maybe even as high as 20 million to get a deal done. And that's also out of Olympiakos' budget as well. So nothing is at the point where it's advanced yet. But as you say, really good season at Olympiakos and plenty of interest in the player. Also from Turkey as well, one to keep an eye on with Prudence's Fenerbahce as well, who have made an inquiry in the last couple of weeks. But everyone's going on the agent side at the moment, as far as I'm aware. Of course, it's possible that Olympiakos are in direct conversations with Wolves because there's something pre-existing there. But certainly with Fenerbahce, the conversations taking place, to my knowledge, are all only on the player side at this stage. So I'd be very surprised if nothing is done in a long window between now and when it shuts in terms of an exit. I think it'd be staggering if he's still a Wolves player come the end of the window. And I think the player's ready to move on as well. But nothing is at that point yet where we can say done deal or even close, despite a series of speculation.
Brilliant. Fabio Silva, do you know, because are you aware of his agent? I know it was publicly announced about his agent was trying to get him a move. What do you think will happen with him?
Yeah, Fabio Silva is going to be an interesting one. I don't think there's going to be a Rangers deal. I think that's off the table. From what I've heard, I think Wolves are ready to move on. A signing that arrived with a lot of promise from what I remember in 2020 and played quite a bit in the Premier League and contributed, and then relatively downhill, unfortunately, ever since. And it's a shame because in that first season in Wolves, he chipped in a lot. He played in a lot of the Premier League games. He scored. And then I can't think after that first season, 2020, 2021, of a Wolves goal. And he must have played 30 or 40 games. And then obviously was on loan at Anderlecht and also PSV and then finally Rangers. None of those three clubs are in the mix. I've heard Betis is one to watch, which I suppose tallies with what you were saying about interest within Spain. And Al Qadsiya, who are a Saudi club. We should have mentioned this actually in the last answer I gave about Saudi, another team just to keep an eye on. And the ex-Rangers CEO has just moved over to Al Qadsiya and only started a couple of days ago. And they're trying to be very ambitious with the signings. And like I said before, you know, Fabio Silva falls into that categorization of a player who is 21 at the moment. So ticks the box of being a young player and allows Saudis, if they sign a 21-year-old or younger, to obviously be in a position where they can sign 10 foreigners instead of 8. So there's a kind of strategic element to bringing on board a young player. It'd be a massive, massive coup for Qadsiya to pull off, because with respect to them, there's bigger clubs fishing around and maybe even one or two clubs that can offer Silva some kind of European football. But the thing is, if the player's just up for it in terms of money, then nobody's going to be able to compete with the offer on the table. And Qadsiya are owned by Aramco, so they're not just reliant on central Saudi funding, even though they're a small team. I've been over there a couple of times in Dammam, and they kind of play on an athletics track, only in front of maybe, I would say, a maximum of 5,000 people. Maybe it will change because they're in the second tier and they've been promoted to the Saudi Pro League now, but it's not big attendances yet. It's going to take several years, even with Nacho joining, to really have the infrastructure there developed. But because they're Aramco and they've got loads of money, they might be able to triple or quadruple a player's wages. So that could be one to watch in the coming weeks as well.
Brilliant. I don't know if you can hear me. I think one of my AirPods have gone off. And then finally, who was the other player we said? Gonçalo Guedes.
Yeah, honestly, not really much to add on this one. I'm not aware of too much interest in him. It's one that I can maybe look into and come back to you. As you rightly say, he was on loan at Villarreal, did okay, played, I think, 20-odd games and scored a few goals. Has never been integral, though, from Wolves' perspective. I know he only joined a couple of years ago, but straight out on loan to Benfica and then to Villarreal as well. There's some interest in Spain. And also from the mid-echelons of Italy, I heard that Genoa made an inquiry as well, but they would only want another loan deal. So it's a key juncture really now for the player and for Wolves, because they've either got to draw a line under this permanently or do yet another loan deal. And from what I'm told, Guedes is only interested in something with permanence, because you sort of look back in his career, and since really probably 2017, something about that, he's always just been shipped out. He joined PSG from Benfica with a big reputation, shipped out to Valencia, joined Valencia permanently, and then obviously played quite a lot of games there, and that gave him stability. So then when you move to Wolves, you expect game time and you expect stability, because we're not talking about a 21-year-old. He's in his mid-20s, is at his peak. And he went back again to one loan and then another loan. So to do a third loan, I don't think, unless it was a loan with an obligation, he would go for that. So I think from the player's point of view, there has to be a permanence to where he goes next. And I'm not sure that Genoa would go for that.
Brilliant.
Nice.
Cheers, Ben. That's all the questions I had. I know we're just approaching the hour mark. I don't know if anyone, Matt or Dan, has any other questions or anything they want to ask you.
Matt, do you want to get a couple of questions out, mate? I know you said hour and 15, if that's okay, but is that all right still? Or
yeah, I just got to be clear by just before 9, because I've got a broadcast live to get to, but I got 15 minutes.
Yeah, lovely.
No, that's fine.
Then, Matt.
Not very sort of lengthy questions from me. Just sort of asking on the situation of Che Adams, because it's come up recently that there's been interest from Saudi Arabia. Obviously, Wolves have been in the frame, going to be a free agent. There's also been talks of Southampton maybe trying to re-sign him. What's the situation with him, Ben?
Yeah, that's all true. It's a good question. So Wolves plus Southampton trying to renew, and they're in a slightly stronger position because they're promoted to the Premier League. And then in addition to that, the Saudi club Al Shabab have entered the race, and they're not one of the PIF controlled clubs, but they've got a fair amount of money. So the way Saudi works, just to go on a slight detour, is that the funds for the bigger deals are central and they're underwritten by the Ministry of Sport. But at a slightly lower level, the clubs can still go and sign their own players, but they're working with two budgets. One's a guaranteed budget, and Shabab might have a maximum of 10 million to spend on players and wages. And then the other is where you say, we want this player, and the ministry say, okay, we'll give you extra funding from the central pool. And that's where you can maybe do a bigger deal or pay a bigger wage. So Al Shabab are prepared to pay Che Adams around 7 million euros base a year. And then on top of that, there would be bonuses for goals and match wins and things like that. So it's quite a lucrative offer, but nothing is guaranteed there yet. And obviously Che Adams has been at the Euros. So it's going to be a key few weeks now, because I think Adams will want to decide and suitors will want to know the answer between now and when pre-season starts. So I'd expect more clarity on Che Adams in the next sort of 2 weeks or so. And the reason for that is just because it's dragged on for everyone. It's dragged on for Southampton. They want to know where they stand. Russell Martin really wants to keep the player. It's dragged on for Wolves. And ultimately for Al Shabab, there's always pressure. The Saudi offers are not go and think about it and come back in a few days or weeks. They're often, here's the money, 24 hours, let us know. And then the player might turn it down and then they'll make another offer. But again, you've got to tell us in a day or two. So there's going to be pressure on Adams now. I think everyone's been very respectful of the fact that he went off to the Euros, but I'd be quite shocked if we get into, let's call it the second week in July. Maybe this is famous last words, but if we got into the second week of July and we don't know what he's doing with his future, then that would be a big, big surprise. So Wolves won't have to wait long now to get an answer. And, you know, they're one of the suitors there. I think Nottingham Forest have also looked a little bit as well and have pushed to try and persuade him to go there. So he's got two options outside of Southampton in the Premier League, one from Saudi Arabia as well. Everything's on the table. I don't think it's a case of negotiating anymore. The best offers are there. And when Adams gets back from the Euros, he's going to have to decide what he wants to do.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good answer. Thank you very much for that. I think it's very much the case that a lot of deals are going to be it's going to be hotting up, isn't it, with the Euros sort of, with players leaving from the Euros and sort of concluding their time there. And obviously start of July as well. I think a lot of deals are sort of going to be into start going now. My next question is regarding Rayan Ait-Nouri, just sort of his situation, really.
Yeah, I think of all the players we've spoken about, there's more chance for me that he's persuaded just to stay. And part of that is because he's playing regularly and he's thriving. And if you look at the suitors that may be interested, can they guarantee him a starting spot? So Chelsea have had a vague look, but are really more focused on Milos Kirkus because they think that they maybe need a squad left back who's a bit younger and won't absolutely demand to play week in, week out, because they got Mark Cucurella, who's playing really well in that position. And they've still got Ben Chilwell, who's the vice captain of the football club as well. So maybe they need to go down the line of buying someone in their early 20s or teens that might wait a little bit. Whereas Rayan Ait-Nouri is thriving and he's 23 years of age. So there's no way he leaves unless he's a starting player, because he played over 30 games for Wolves last season. And if you look back at his career, really, since joining Wolves, he's always played in excess of 20 games, even when he was a little bit younger. So this is not a move to a big club and be a squad player. And if you turn your attention to Manchester United, who also like the player, again, they've still got Luke Shaw there at the moment. So as long as he's fit, then is Ait-Nouri going to play every single week? Add to the fact that Wolves have got other players they can sell if they feel that they need the money. And if Kilman goes, you don't want two on that left side that desecrate the back line of Wolves. So if there's an acceptance now that Kilman might be the one to go, I would expect Wolves to be relatively bullish as far as Ait-Nouri is concerned. So there is some interest from the Premier League and also from Italy as well. Napoli really like the player as well. And I think in Germany, Bayern have looked in the past, but are not active at this point and don't necessarily now within their squad think that there's room for him on that left-hand side. But it just shows you the calibre of clubs that are interested. But I think when we look at potential Wolves exits, I would expect Wolves to be really, really firm and back their manager and back their finances. And if they have another big outgoing, then Ait-Nouri might have to wait for his opportunity to leave the football club.
I think it's very much the case for me that Ait-Nouri would be one of the players that I certainly wouldn't be selling. And it would have to be crazy, 70 to 80 million. Or to even consider it, because I think he's so key to sort of how Wolves play and how sort of we go about our business. And then my last question is on another player, and it's on Yerson Mosquera. Obviously coming off a really good loan spell at Villarreal. There's a lot of been sort of conflicting reports about his situation, whether Villarreal want to try sign him on a permanent. Obviously, we know that Wolves want him to be a mainstay in the team. Gary O'Neill really likes him, but it will be the case that if he doesn't want to stay at Wolves, Wolves won't be keeping him. So I just wanted to ask about Yerson Mosquera's situation, please, Ben.
Yeah, I think he enjoyed it there, as you say, on that loan spell with Villarreal, and now it's a case of what is the pathway in terms of returning. So it's not about picking one club over the other. My understanding is that Villarreal would like to sign the player permanently, but ultimately it's kind of up to Wolves. And I think he's done enough now, having been at the football club, to earn some first-team opportunities. So this is fully in Wolves' control from what I'm told. And what I like about the player is that he is a threat in both boxes and ultimately has, within his development, a higher ceiling to still improve. So what I think is going to happen is that Wolves will bring him back with the situation fully in their control, and he will do a full pre-season with Wolves. And in that pre-season with Wolves, he'll then have a conversation with the manager as to whether or not he's going to get an opportunity in the Premier League. And it reminds me of when Saliba was playing in France, and there was a lot of talk about a exit and how he would never get game time at Arsenal. And he got challenged in pre-season to break in. And then from game one, Saliba was starting for Arsenal. And now it seems ridiculous that at that point we were even talking about a Saliba exit. I don't think yet Mosquera is quite there. And he needs to probably get another season under his belt where he's getting 15, 20, 25 games. And that hasn't really happened since he was at Cincinnati. So as much as Villarreal like him and as much as the player may push for game time, we're not talking about a situation where he went to Villarreal and played 30, 40 games. I think he still only appeared in about 15. And he showed as a centre-back that he could score goals, and he showed that he could be imposing and get his 6 foot, whatever, 6'2", 6'3" frame around. But he's not done enough yet. So even though he's 23, we've not seen enough top-level game time. And that's what Wolves need to judge ultimately. And I think pre-season is going to be key. So I don't think the player has this in his control at this stage. I think it's all actually about Wolves and pre-season. And if in pre-season they feel that he's right they'll throw him in the new season, and it'll be a breakthrough season for him at Wolves. And he'll have to accept that he starts as a squad player, he gets game time, he ends the season. Maybe this is the pathway that Wolves will say, with 20, 25 appearances in all competitions. And then from there, maybe he can break his way in as a starter at the age of 24 or 25. And that will be up to Wolves. If they don't think he's got that in him, then the door becomes open to Villarreal. But I don't think this is a situation where the player can force himself out. I think this is all about Wolves saying, look, we've invested in your pathway. We sent you to Cincinnati. You did well. We sent you to Villarreal. You got game time at a much higher level. You did well. And again, you were that impact player in both boxes. Now it's up to Wolves. I think despite agent talk and despite rumours and despite what Villarreal want, I really don't think at this stage, as of now, it's in the player camp control. It's about him having a statement pre-season and making Wolves feel this is your pathway. And if he does that, he remains a Wolves player. If he doesn't do that, then they might put him on the market. But it's kind of for Gary O'Neill and the coaching staff to assess first, rather than the player to be thinking about driving a move before they've even kicked a ball in pre-season. If he doesn't have that ambition and hunger to break into the Wolves setup, then ultimately that will be reflected in pre-season, and they will also want to move him on somewhere. But hopefully he comes back hungry and with the desire to force his way into the Wolves first team reckoning. And if he does, there'll be no suggestion that he's going anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I think that'll be the case really with a lot of players. I think Chiquinho, for example, another player, it will be very much the case that a lot of these players need to have a pre-season sort of to be looked at, and then sort of they can go from there really on their sort of situation and where they lie in the squad type of thing.
Yeah, it's compliment as well to the player though, because I think in sort of May or maybe it was April, he said that he'd quite like to stay at Villarreal, and that's fine. You know, players will always think that. They'll always want that ability. Levi Colwell, even before he signed at Chelsea, was sort of talking very highly about Brighton, and there was some suggestion that he'd go back there, but the parent club just said no. So if he leaves, it will be on Wolves' terms because they don't think he's right for them. They don't think he's good enough. But if they're happy with his development and that continues in pre-season, then I don't think they'll entertain any offers despite links with some big clubs.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Nice. We just got one question coming out about what do you think about Wolves' long-term strategy going
I
forward?
think it's more related to Fosun, Ben, as well. Like where you think Fosun will go. Obviously the owner club of Wolves.
Yeah, it does look like they might be open to some kind of strategic investment, which would usually be minority. And there's no real surprise because we're in that kind of phase now in football where everyone needs a strategic partner, or everyone has to consider, in some clubs' case, multi-club to kind of keep pace. And it's at that point now where Wolves have built good foundations. They've got a strong and very specific scouting network, and they need to make sure that they're sustainable on and off the field. And I think they're doing that with increased revenue. They're doing that with brand expansion. But on the football side of things, they may feel that they need a new strategic partner to really take things forwards. And when you're a club like Wolves, and it's the same with my club, Leicester, in fact, we saw it directly at Leicester, you can teeter from periods of success to periods of failure. Leicester won the Premier League in 2015-16. And then in less than 10 years, they found themselves in the Championship and with some financial difficulty, even though they're now back in the Premier League. But one thing Leicester did with their money was invest in training centre and data and medical department bolstering. So the bones are good. And I think obviously Wolves want to get that renovation done with, it's the Steve Bull stand, right? That's been a point of contention for a while. They want to improve their facilities behind the scenes. And they want to make sure that they don't fall into that trap where you get a bit of success, but then with that success comes bonuses and higher wages. And maybe if you get European football, you feel a bit stretched. And then if it's taken away from you in 4 or 5 years' time, you can pay the price. And Wolves need to make sure that they're a mainstay in the Premier League. And luckily they have been. So the long-term strategy is some form of strategic backing to make sure that financially they're on a sound footing. And then obviously they want to push towards top half and challenging for European football. I was looking, by the way, when there was that VAR vote that Wolves tabled, which was very productive. I know it lost 19-1, but it was a extremely healthy and welcome conversation. So no one was laughing Wolves out of the room. Quite the opposite. Everyone was glad to have that conversation. And I was looking at the season, I think it was the first season that VAR was introduced, the one where Wolves were in and around Champions League football, but I think they ended up finishing about 7th in the table. I can't remember the exact year off the top of my head. And if you'd have, in that season, removed VAR, then Wolves would have been 4th. And they would have had Champions League in that first season. And I was quite surprised in all of the lobbying and the pitching that Wolves didn't make that point, that in the VAR-less table, even though it's not an exact science, Wolves would have actually got Champions League football. So they've been there or thereabouts, but it's about making sure that you consolidate, and it's about making sure you're sustainable financially, and it's about making sure that you don't overstretch. And it's so tough because on the football side, you want to be as ambitious as you can. And you've got clubs like Villa and Newcastle and potentially West Ham that in any given season, they might be the ones, and Wolves included, to kind of break in and be the one that gets Europa League, or be the one in Villa's case that gets even better. But it can't just be like a one-season wonder. You have to have a plan. So I think Wolves are thinking very strategically, very methodically. They've consolidated themselves in the Premier League, and now they need to make sure that they kick on, because eventually people forget how good it is just to comfortably stay up. And they get bored of mid-table mediocrity, and then they start saying, why are we not doing what Villa are doing? Why are we not doing what other clubs like Leicester are doing? And Wolves can get there, but only with a sound financial footing and good brand expansion and revenue from sponsorship, all to make sure that eventually they can spend on that big signing that makes the difference, or they can keep hold of their star names. So I think this summer's a big test to the long-term strategy. How ambitious are they? Can they keep a Rayan Ait-Nouri? What about João Gomez? Can they make sure that Neto stays and get him fit? Because with that kind of spine, even if you lose a Kilman and maybe one goal scorer added, they stand a very realistic chance of moving up 6 or 7 places. And that puts you in the conversation for European football. And then the last thing I'd say, just as a slightly ridiculous and flippant aside, is in terms of doing well this season, who on earth did Wolves fall out with on the fixture calendar? Because, my God, they've got just about the hardest start to the season that I can think of. You've got to go away at Arsenal, home to Chelsea, who are going to be really good, play against Forest, which is a form of derby, I suppose. If we're classifying Leicester as a derby, then Forest becomes a very vague derby. You've got to play Newcastle, you've got to play Villa, you've got to play Liverpool, you've got to go away at Brentford, you've got to go home to Manchester City, you've got to go away at Brighton. The first game that you think, well, okay, on paper, they might be slight favourites to win, is home to Crystal Palace, who finished the season in electric.
And beat us.
I can't
beat
believe
us last game.
Always beat us.
One gets easier. It's absolutely ridiculous. So I fear a bit for Wolves, only in the sense of if they kind of have a season like they did last season, and because of that tough start, they just don't pick up that many points in the opening games, you're spending the whole season looking over your shoulder. So I hope it doesn't pan out like that. But I think they've got the worst start on paper in the entire Premier League.
I'd agree.
It's probably because of the VAR debacle, isn't it, to be honest?
Maybe it is.
Probably gone like, there you go, have that start.
Wouldn't surprise me at all.
It's such a horrible start. I mean, you never know with these things, but and away at Forest, they got just as good a chance as winning that game. Home to Newcastle, if home form is good, but it's all form teams, or it's all teams that are expected to do well. And Forest form at the City Ground was good. Newcastle were pretty decent away from home. Villa at home. None of them are easy.
No.
You're spot
So
on.
it's all to come straight away, to be fair. But you know what? Pre-season under Gary O'Neill, couple of new fresh faces and everything. Maybe hold on to some players and sort of kick on from where we were. Really, I think, like you were saying, Ben, we were only a few players away really from having a really good season. I think injuries hurt us so hard, and at one point we literally had to play Lemina as a 9. So it's one of them. Like if we had like a Che Adams or something on the bench, it would have been a difference maker, especially against Coventry. And I think that's where you really draw the line. Really, I think Wolves just need to really start getting some bodies in. Really.
Yeah, I think as well, Gary O'Neill is in a very interesting place because if he keeps the tools available to him, he can be a bit more gung-ho and ambitious. His whole career, he's kind of had to firefight. And even coming into Wolves to begin with, firefight a little bit. And if you start this season with stability and continuity, and that spine of the team is there, it might be ambitious to say it's going to be Sarr, Ait-Nouri, Kilman, João Gomez, Neto, plus some great new striker. But if it is, then you're thinking, this isn't a Wolves team that should be looking over their shoulder. This is a Wolves team that should be setting themselves a minimum of 50 points. And if they have a good season, 65 points. And then you're firmly in the conversation for European football. But it needs the manager mentality, especially away from home, because Wolves are fine at home. But I covered a number of games for TalkSport last season. And at times, they were so defensive-minded. They were so passive in games. And some of that is down to the fact that you don't need that many chances when you've got these kind of players. You can be dynamic on the counter-attack. You don't need that many shots on goal. But they lulled you into a false sense of security. And when it worked, it was that perfect smash and grab. But when it didn't work, they bored you to death at times, to be honest with you, especially away from home. And it's staggering to me when we say that and you look at the amount of dynamic talent. Like, what have Wolves always done historically? They've gone abroad, they've got technicians, they've got young, hungry players that are fast, are dynamic, they play with a lot of width. So you know they've got that ability to not just smash and grab occasionally. You know they've got that ability to get a bit more of the ball on the road, control the game, and excite you. And I think that the longer he stays and the more of those core players that remain, the more points they can take on the road by just having a bit more of a go. And it is a balance. But there's no reason why you have to go away at a Forest, away at a Leicester, away at a Southampton, etc., with any inferiority complex. Go and control the game, play it on your terms. All the surfaces are good, all the conditions are good in the Premier League. Play on the fact that Wolves are full of technicians and go and win games on the road, scoring earlier and being a bit more comfortable on the ball and dominating. And if he gets that in his mind that this is not an inferior Wolves team, this is not a Wolves team that have to tactically adapt as much on the road, and they pick up 10 more points on the road, that will make all the difference in the world. I don't think it's a problem at home, and I don't think it's an O'Neill specific problem, but I think it's a group mentality where they have had to firefight, they have had to dig in, they have had to look over their shoulder. Now you're starting with a blank slate. He's been there a bit longer. Make a few savvy signings, keep the spine of the team, pick up 10 more points on the road, score 15 more goals at home. You could be in for a very successful season.
Nice one, Ben. We're going to let you get off, mate. Thank you so much for being here and you know, bracing us with your presence and all of the knowledge that we need to know about all this transfer malarkey. You know, we know all about all the rumours and everything, but hearing it from you and everything is it's been a pleasure. So thank you very much for your time, mate.
Yeah, of course. Keep up the good work, guys. I always enjoy the work that you do, and it's great interacting with Wolves fans as well. I wish Wolves all the best for the new season. Hopefully we'll speak again soon, but I think it's a really exciting club with a great fan base, a rich history. And I was actually watching, even though it's not directly related, but I was out at a SoccerX conference in America and I was watching the story about the LA Wolves, I think it was.
Yeah. I went to the premiere. Yeah.
Incredible. And I just think all these little things, you know, and of course you might want the renovation of the stands, but I love the feel of Molineux. I love the atmosphere. I love the fan base. Growing up, I was always jealous as a Leicester fan because the kit as well, because it was like bright and different. So there's a lot to like about Wolves. And like I say, I hope that horrible start to the season yields more points than many might expect. And I wish you guys all the best for the new season.
Thanks,
man.
Ben.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on. You too. See you later.
Bye-bye.
I'm going to have to shoot off as well, guys.
No worries, John. No worries,
Fine, mate.
guys.
See you in a bit.
See you later,
See you in a bit, mate.
Yes, Matt, that was good, man.
Yeah,
it's
really
mad.
good.
It's mad hearing all the things that you see, like as rumors and everything. Actually, like coming from someone's mouth. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a bit mental, isn't it, really?
It is,
But what
yeah.
a legend. What a legend for joining us, and
Mhm.
definitely got a few things there, I think, John, writing down. I don't know if you did yourself, Matt, but definitely a few
Yeah.
things there that I hadn't heard
Yeah,
about.
definitely. Yeah, definitely.
So,
I think like the
so
PSG interest in
yeah,
Ait-Nouri, and he said about Neto as well. Very interesting.
yeah,
I think this sort of makes sense really because PSG recently have signed loads of Portuguese players because of their sporting director.
yeah.
So to be linked to someone like Neto, for example,
Mm.
not surprising at all.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, especially with him how he's doing well at the moment. I think if he does well as well in the Euros now,
Mm-hmm.
I think you can kind of pull the injury issues away to one side if he gets the game time. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
If he stays in for a lot of the season, impacts it, gets a load of minutes, you can start thinking then, all right, if he does come back to Wolves, maybe he's going to play a lot more, and he's going to have like a little bit more competition with wingers coming in
Yeah.
and stuff. So yeah, interesting. A lot of things that you were saying. We
Very.
obviously heard about a couple of things, but I expected a lot more from Sarr, to be honest. I thought a lot more
Yeah.
people were looking at Sarr, and
It's a weird one with it, isn't it? Because I mean, a lot of Wolves fans don't rate him at all, and with the sort of amount of links that we've had recently with goalkeepers, it really does make you think that Jose Sarr is probably going to be on the move. And obviously, like the way that we know that O'Neill wants to play when it comes to like playing out from the back, that type of thing, it doesn't really suit the mold of that. So as much
Sarabia
as
as well.
yeah,
Sarabia as well was interesting.
I think Sarabia is very likely to leave just because of his wages, really. And he wouldn't really have played unless we'd had the injuries we had. You know what I mean? Like because Neto would have started ahead of him. So
yeah, well, that was the only reason he got game time, wasn't it?
Exactly,
really?
yeah, because it was after that Tottenham game. So yeah, it's a weird one. I think there's so many players where their sort of situation is up in the air. I think we didn't really speak about him, but I think Semedo as well. I mean, sort of going to the latter years of his contract now. Wolves do have, I think, they're going to sort of negotiate on to try keep him, but he's going to have to accept a pay decrease. So there's so many players that
it's either going to be a pay decrease or it's going to be the same contracts, and we just get rid of players around him to sort of lower the wages and just make him like the higher earner. Which I said the other day, like if you're going to have a higher earner, if I think about players that kind of deserve a decent wage, Semedo was very much one of those players that
100%.
that could really get away with it, really, without us sort of scrutinising him.
It was quite interesting on Kilman as well, because he said that only one bid had been made, where there's a lot of people sort of what John asked him, a lot of people have said that another bid's been made and it's included a West Ham player, that type of thing. So it's interesting to see that from what he's heard that only one bid have been named. But Kilman's a really interesting one, because I don't know if you agree, Dan, but Kilman's been a player that I always thought, as much as the fans sometimes got on his back and didn't rate him, I always thought he'd be a player that Wolves would 100% not sell. And of course, we do want to keep him, don't get me wrong, but it's very much the case of now, I think there's serious interest in him. And right now, I think there's a bigger chance that he leaves the club than stays. And to me, like if you asked me that sort of a month or two ago, I'd have certainly not said that. So it's crazy that he could be leaving the club, because, as I've just said, I didn't think he would.
Yeah, I think it's mad how, like we talked about this before, but I think it's mad how many different clubs are coming forward for him so early on, really.
Yeah.
But I do think, again, it's what Ben said about the style of player he is, left-footed centre-back. Also, the fact that he, other than like the last couple of seasons, he was actually a good player for Wolves, and with an experienced centre back next to him, and there's going to be a load of teams that have got more experience at the back than we have. I mean, even if you look at West Ham, there's the players that he'd go next to. There's a load of experience there in that back line. Do you know what I mean? And I don't really see us getting anyone in like as a centre back unless he goes, really.
Yeah.
I don't think that's an area that we're massively focused on just yet.
No, but the links that we've had recently, I think we had one with PSV centre back. We've had one with some centre back from Port. I think David Carmo, and then PSV centre back, very similar to the Jose Sarr situation. Makes you wonder, are we sort of preparing for Kilman to maybe depart the club?
I think that's what more about what it is, isn't it? It's more sort of having something ready just in case something happens.
It's what Wolves always like.
It's clever business, really, because you could find yourself, in a world of trouble, similar to how we was when all the players left, like Neves and that. Obviously, that was for PSR and everything, but had we not been a bit business savvy with Tommy Doyle and stuff like that, that would have been a nightmare, wouldn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It definitely would have been. It's an interesting one, I think. I think I'm glad that sort of what he said about Ait-Nouri, I think, sort of reassured me that I think he won't be obviously, who knows in football. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to jinx anything, but there is a big chance that he stays because, as I sort of mentioned when we were discussing Ait-Nouri, he's the player for me that I really don't want to lose. Simply,
I don't want him to leave over everybody. I think pretty much.
Yeah.
I can't see replacement for him at all. I think that I'm surprised, to be fair, that he hasn't been linked more. But as we were speaking about, it might all just come out of the blue.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the fact that, for example, Kilman hasn't left yet, or Ait-Nouri hasn't left yet, or Neto hasn't left yet, it means nothing, does it? Really, it's so early on.
Yeah.
But I agree. It's quite surprising to me how sort of stuff's come to fruition already. Like as you mentioned, the 2 bids for Kilman. I mean, I certainly wouldn't have expected anything this soon from West Ham and Newcastle. But also with Kilman, something that we didn't mention is obviously Lopetegui and how, he's driving this deal, really. He's sort of, he wants Kilman. He made him captain at Wolves. So that he's a big reason. And also, the fringe players, I sort of wanted to discuss them. We've discussed them before, sort of their situation. We all know that players like Guedes, Fabio Silva and Pedence, we all know that they're going to leave Wolves. But in my opinion, it's very interesting because he sort of mentioned how Fabio Silva's had interest from Saudi, which I don't think we'd heard of already. And I think that's a move that I'd like to think he'd probably accept it because, Saudi's sort of an up-and-coming project, and he'd be playing with some decent players, like a team that's sort of on the up, obviously signed Nacho. So it'd be because he could be a mainstay in that project. And as Ben said, they could, triple his wages type thing. So it's interesting to see what happens with players like that. I think Guedes, he said that Guedes will probably move on a permanent, but there's been conflicting reports of that because obviously he's got 3 years left on his deal and Wolves will want to recoup as much money as they can from him. So it's just so interesting. I think this summer, there's so much sort of in the pipeline and so much that could happen. It's just really interesting to see what is going to happen. I can't wait.
It's going to be mega interesting to think how we're actually going to line up. Do you know what I mean?
How 100%.
How we're going to line up in the first game in the Premier League is just going to be so bizarre. And with all the ticketing situation and everything as well, is Molineux going to be, full to the rafters? Is it going to? Is there going to be booing over the Jeff situation? There's just so much already that it just makes my head spin thinking about it all, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, this is the type of year that I absolutely love, though. I thrive with it. Just so interesting to me. I can't wait to sort of see the development and see what happens because you look at the sort of signings that we've made with Pedro Lima and Rodrigo Gomez, they come out of the blue. So, in my opinion, it wouldn't be surprised. Well, the club are obviously working on stuff right now. They're not going to be doing F all, but it's so interesting to see what could happen. And I think this week, especially, I do think there's going to be developments on Kilman's future as well. So it's really interesting because to lose your captain so early on in the window, and also something that we didn't ask him, which I should have thinking about it, but
you can
always
about the
sell-on clause.
You can always message him, by the way.
I wanted to speak about it, the sell-on clause as well. We didn't really mention because I think it's 10 to 15, is it, or is it 20? 10 to 20%, something like that. The sell-on clause that Maidenhead have for Kilman.
I think it's 15 to 20%.
Yeah, I think it is. And let's be honest, that's another big reason why
even 15's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a crap ton of money, especially for
Wow.
a club like that. You know, they're going to be absolutely loving it. So they're going to be hoping that we do sell him because, you know, say we sold him for 40 mil, that's what, like 8 million for them or something like that. So for a club like that, that's insane money. I remember when he was linked to Napoli, and Napoli obviously bidded for him, and I remember everyone was talking about it there and saying how they'd be absolutely gutted if he didn't join. But it's very much the case of that I don't see Kilman forcing a move because at the end of the day, he weren't that asked about going to Napoli. Napoli at the time were, I think, top of the league because it was the season they won the league. And if you weren't asked about there, it's going to be.
Do you think though it was more sort of situational, seeing all the players going out and seeing more of a sort of, you know, I might be able to really like make a bit of an impact here with the club now. You know what I mean? Get myself on that in that England lineup because
because you
there
don't want to
isn't
risk it,
many.
do you, and not play? I know what you
Yeah.
mean. Yeah, no,
I think
that's true. It's a
you
fair
get.
point.
I think it's the England lineup for me that's keeping him around because I feel like if you go abroad, it gets harder for you to you know get Gareth to see you and everything. I know that it's that he'll still like have scouts out there doing that, but I
I know
think
what you
when
mean.
when you're on the main stage in the Premier League, man, you know what, it's so easy to get spotted. You look at Guy here at the moment and stuff like that, and he looks like a player really Kilman. If he had a good season, he'd be in the England lineup. Pretty straightforward. Let's be fair.
Yeah, literally. And it's a sort of a shame for him that he decreased his level because the level that he had sort of when he sort of Bruno Lage's season and Lopetegui's season, like he was very consistent. And now I just think it's for him finding that consistency because we all know there's a player there. It's just he's sort of in shot of confidence really last season, maybe due to pressure of being captain or whatever. And that's an interesting one, I think, because if he is to leave, obviously Wolves have got to name another captain, and I don't think that will be sort of in the club's sort of eye line at the minute. I think they'd, as much as a lot of Wolves fans would probably not want Kilman to be captain, even if he was at the club, I think it's very much the case that he would have stayed captain. So if he is to leave, who do you pick as captain? I think the obvious options are probably like Dorse, Lamina, and some people have mentioned Cunha actually, which I'm not too sure about that. Not against it.
This isn't really like news or anything, but like I was listening to the Wolves Weekly podcast, and Mikey had Lamina on as a guest.
Oh yeah, is that recent or?
Yeah, really recent, like just gone, like, and he was mentioning about like how much he's grown as a player around the club and everything, and the situation with his dad and everything, seeing all of the fans get. I wouldn't be surprised if he was captain.
He is a real sort
like
of favourite, isn't he?
Yeah, kind of makes a lot of sense with how his season panned out and everything. You could see that kind of player spark really under that with that captain's armband. I think that would be
I agree. I think he's very much a personnel that I think if he was to have captain on, I think it'd elevate his performances, and I think he'd be even more up for it than he was. And
speaks well as well.
Yeah, with Lamina, I mean he's playing the best football of his career at Wolves. As far as I'm aware, maybe
he said that himself.
Yeah, so well there you go. Because obviously burst, not using like a Micah Richards phrase, but he burst onto the scene at Juventus.
Yeah.
And then sort of plummeted from there because he had like loan spells in like the Prem at like Fulham, Saints, and that, and it didn't quite happen for him. But now I think he's also fixed his attitude because he was quite sort of petulant, and I don't think really at Wolves he's done anything that's been, touch wood, that petulant. I think
no, not at all.
I can only remember him being sent off once, and that was against Southampton, where he was like, was it the third player? Yeah, the third player to go over to the ref or something, and that to get booked, which was absolutely ludicrous.
Happened like 20,000 times since.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the rule that they made recently, where he had to what's it called? Is it like the captain can speak to the ref or something in the Euros?
Yeah,
and it's like, well, that's not happening. Like there's constant players going around the ref. So who blooming knows? It's a weird one. It's a very weird situation with him. But
yeah, nice.
I certainly wouldn't be against giving Lamina captaincy, but I think my first choice would probably be Craig Dawson for me, yeah. But as we said, we're speaking like this, but Kilman's still a Wolves player, so
it'd be
it's what we
interesting
do, and we ponder, we try speak
Well,
about
yeah,
things.
that's what it's all about, isn't it? I know I've had quite a few people just recently like comment and say like, "Oh, it's all fake news and everything," and I'm like, we're literally reporting on what reporters are saying. Like,
Of course, yeah.
you could do what we do. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
We're just here. Like, don't kill the messenger if we get anything wrong.
Yeah,
it's not like
it's like when they report saying what's it called? It's like they report when they're saying like interested FC or something, and it's like, well, we can't really help it. We're just reporting the news that's out there.
You literally just heard it from Ben Jacobs. Like, he knows. He definitely knows more than we do, obviously, but he's also got like the players that Wolves are interested in. If he posts it, it's only like what we're doing. Do you know what I mean? It's just it's really silly. But I kind of understand it if you're not sort of this side of the camera as well in a way. But I thought I'd really just address that because we're not by any means breaking news that we figure out ourselves. These are very much things that we find that are reported, and if those things don't come into fruition, then
like there's sometimes where we have our own sort of reports and that, like the leak kit, for example. But apart from that, I mean, the source is there and the tweet and it or whatever. Pretty light and day what we're referring to that they've sort of posted it. But yeah, as I've said, I'm really excited, and it's been a really good episode. He was a great guest. I think he spoke really well. Sort of, you could tell he's done work on camera before because he was so sort of confident. And
what I was going to say as well, Matt, is I bet you like dream of being in these sort of shoes in the future.
Yeah, no, it's definitely what
if you're doing that,
I want to go down for sure.
You're doing that at uni at the moment.
No, and I mean, someone like him is someone you aspire to be like, and he's been very successful.
Just got to make some tea, mate. Just got to make some tea.
Yeah. I mean, there you go. That's the thing, though, and it's helping out any way you can and sort of getting yourself across. So, no, fair play to him, and he's been really successful and doing well, and really good to have him on because he's actually good to talk to. Do you know what I mean? It's not like he was quite blunt; like he was really open, spoke really well, as I've mentioned.
Lovely guest.
Certainly someone that I'd like to have on again because he was very insightful. So
yeah, definitely. If you're watching this back, we 100% would love to like have you on again, whenever you can, because that was a fantastic bit of information you gave us. So
yeah,
thank you very much for that. I have actually got to go now, so I'm going to wrap it up here, guys. Thank you so much for everybody that's tuned in. I know we haven't really got talking too much with the chat today, but we had a guest on that we had a lot of information to sort of get out of him and everything. Sort of interfered really with us talking to you lot. So apologise for that. But if you've got anything to say, you can always leave in the comments. I reply to every single comment. So anything you want to say, guys, leave it down there, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible.
Carry on, Matt. A lot of good. I was going to say, sorry, a lot of news that we can sort of tweet out as well on stuff that hasn't really been reported yet. I know John was writing it down, so sure we'll be on that straight away.
Yeah, he's just said that we're able to do that as well, so that's wicked. So thanks for that, mate. In advance.
Yeah, perfect.
But yeah. Lovely. If you're watching this, if you're watching this on YouTube, give us a like, give us a subscribe. If you're watching this over on all socials, give us a like on there as well. Share it with your mates. And if you're listening to this on Spotify, give us a 5 stars out of 5. That would be great as well, with a nice review as well. That'd be really good.
Be great,
But yeah, so until the next one, guys. Obviously, we do this fortnightly. We try and get a guest for each one. If we can't get a guest, we'll still do a show and everything. And we'll talk about everything that's happened in the last 2 weeks. So look forward to that. And any news that breaks, we'll be sure to go over to our socials. Matt, what are all our socials?
Wolfpack WWFC on Instagram, Twitter, and then the Wolfpack on Facebook. So yeah,
nice one.
Be sure to check us out, and thank you very much for tuning in. Yeah,
cool. All right, guys. Catch you later, guys. Have a nice rest of your week, and we'll see you on the next one.
Yeah,
In
see you in a bit.
guys. Bye,
In
bye,
a
bye.
bit.